By the time fatigue begins to take hold, the situation has already transitioned from a timing problem into a resource crisis. What started as a delayed morning is now a full system strain on energy, attention, and physiological stability. The danger here is subtle but critical. Fatigue does not announce itself with clarity. It disguises itself as mild distraction, minor irritability, or the false confidence that you are still functioning within acceptable limits. In reality, your brain is entering a state of reduced metabolic efficiency. Glucose utilization in key cognitive regions declines, neurotransmitter balance shifts, and the precision of neural signaling begins to degrade. You are no longer operating at baseline even if you believe you are. The analysis of this phase reveals a convergence of stressors that rarely occur in isolation. Cognitive load remains elevated from the compressed morning, cortisol levels have not fully normalized, and now sleep pressure, regulated by adenosine accumulation in the brain, begins to rise. This creates a layered interference pattern in your neural processing. Reaction times slow further, working memory capacity shrinks, and the ability to switch between tasks deteriorates. What makes this particularly dangerous is that the decline is gradual, making it difficult for individuals to self-diagnose their own impairment. A common misunderstanding at this stage is the belief that short bursts of stimulation, caffeine, sugar, or rapid task switching, can restore performance. While these interventions may produce temporary increases in alertness, they do not address the underlying deficits. Caffeine, for example, works primarily by blocking adenosine receptors, masking the sensation of fatigue without eliminating its physiological cause. This can create a mismatch between perceived and actual capability, leading individuals to take on tasks that exceed their current functional capacity. The result is a higher likelihood of error, not a reduction in it. The hidden science becomes clearer when examining how the brain allocates resources under strain. The prefrontal cortex, responsible for planning, decision-making, and impulse control, is one of the most energy-demanding regions of the brain. Under conditions of fatigue and stress, the brain begins to conserve energy by reducing activity in this region, shifting control to more primitive, habit-driven systems. This is not a conscious decision. It is an adaptive response designed to preserve energy. However, in complex modern environments, this shift can be maladaptive. Habit-based responses are efficient but inflexible, and they often fail when conditions deviate from the norm, which in a disrupted day they almost always do. Evidence for this can be observed in transportation safety data. Studies on driver fatigue consistently show that individuals experiencing moderate sleep deprivation or extended wakefulness exhibit impairment levels comparable to alcohol intoxication. Reaction times increase, lane deviations become more frequent, and hazard detection declines significantly. Importantly, many of these individuals report feeling only slightly tired, highlighting the disconnect between subjective perception and objective performance. The same principles apply to any task requiring sustained attention and rapid decision-making. The survival implications extend beyond individual performance into environmental interaction. As your internal systems degrade, your ability to accurately interpret external cues diminishes. You may misjudge the speed of an approaching vehicle, underestimate the time required to complete a task, or overlook subtle warning signs in your surroundings. This is compounded by attentional narrowing, where focus becomes locked onto immediate concerns, reducing awareness of peripheral risks. In a dynamic environment, this loss of situational awareness can have serious consequences. As the afternoon progresses, another factor begins to exert influence: nutritional imbalance. Irregular eating patterns, often a direct result of a disrupted schedule, lead to fluctuations in blood glucose levels. The brain relies heavily on a stable supply of glucose, and even minor dips can impair cognitive function. Symptoms include difficulty concentrating, increased irritability, and a tendency toward impulsive decisions. When combined with existing fatigue and stress, these effects are amplified, creating a compounding degradation of performance. This escalation is not linear. It follows a pattern of threshold effects, where small additional stressors can trigger disproportionately large declines in function once certain limits are reached. In systems engineering, this is often described as operating near the edge of failure, where redundancy is minimal and resilience is low. In human terms, it means that by late afternoon, your capacity to absorb new disruptions is significantly reduced. A minor inconvenience, an unexpected delay, a sudden demand, a simple mistake, can push the system into a state of overload. At this point, behavioral changes become more pronounced. Communication may become less clear or more abrupt, increasing the likelihood of misunderstandings. Decision-making may shift toward short-term solutions at the expense of long-term outcomes. There is also an increased tendency toward risk-taking, as the brain's ability to accurately assess consequences is compromised. These behaviors are not random. They are predictable outcomes of the underlying physiological and cognitive state. The transition into evening introduces a new layer of complexity. As daylight decreases, the body begins to prepare for rest, initiating the release of melatonin and reducing core body temperature. However, if stress levels remain elevated and tasks are still incomplete, this natural transition is disrupted. The result is a state of biological conflict, where the body is signaling for rest while the mind is attempting to maintain activity. This mismatch further degrades performance and increases the likelihood of errors. In high-stakes environments, this combination of fatigue, stress, and misalignment can lead to critical failures. Industrial accident analyses frequently identify late-day fatigue as a contributing factor, particularly in tasks requiring sustained attention and precision. The pattern is consistent across domains. As resources deplete and pressures persist, the margin for error collapses. What is often overlooked is that this entire progression, from a delayed morning to late-day fatigue, is not a series of independent events. It is a continuous chain, each link influencing the next. The initial disruption sets the conditions for everything that follows, and without intervention, the system continues to degrade. And yet, even at this stage, most individuals continue to push forward, attempting to complete remaining tasks despite diminishing capacity. This persistence, while understandable, introduces a final and often underestimated risk. Because as the day approaches its end, the cumulative effects of cognitive strain, physiological imbalance, and environmental pressure converge into a critical point, one where the probability of significant error or oversight is at its highest. The moment your alarm fails to go off on time, the chain reaction has already begun. It feels small, almost harmless, a few lost minutes, a delayed start. But what follows is not just inconvenience. It is a cascade failure, a breakdown of carefully balanced systems that most people never even realize they depend on. The modern human day is engineered with precision, layered with invisible dependencies on timing, energy, cognition, and environment. When one component slips, the entire structure begins to deform under pressure. This is not chaos in the dramatic sense. It is something quieter, more dangerous, a slow misalignment between intention and reality that compounds with every passing minute. The danger is not the late start itself. The danger is what the late start does to your biological and cognitive systems. Your body operates on circadian rhythms regulated by light exposure, hormonal cycles, and habitual timing. When you wake abruptly, especially under stress, your cortisol spikes earlier and more aggressively than intended. This hormone, often associated with stress, is also responsible for alertness and energy mobilization. But when it surges in an unplanned way, it disrupts the delicate sequence your body uses to transition from rest to full function. Reaction time slows, decision-making becomes impulsive, and risk assessment begins to degrade. You are technically awake, but not fully operational. Most people misunderstand this moment. They assume the solution is speed, move faster, skip steps, compress time to compensate for the delay. This instinct is almost universal, and it is almost always wrong. Speed under cognitive impairment does not recover lost efficiency. It amplifies error rates. Studies in human factors engineering show that when individuals attempt to catch up under time pressure, they are significantly more likely to make procedural mistakes, overlook critical details, and misjudge priorities. The brain, under stress, shifts from analytical processing to heuristic shortcuts. These shortcuts are efficient in stable conditions but dangerously unreliable in disrupted ones. The hidden science here lies in what is known as decision fatigue and cognitive load saturation. Every small choice you make, what to wear, what to eat, which route to take, consumes a measurable amount of mental energy. On a normal day, these decisions are distributed across time, allowing your brain to recover between them. But when your schedule compresses, these decisions stack on top of each other, creating a bottleneck in your cognitive processing capacity. The result is not just mental exhaustion, it is a measurable decline in executive function. Your ability to plan, prioritize, and inhibit poor choices begins to erode. Evidence of this can be seen in high-risk professions where timing and precision are critical. In aviation, for example, incident reports frequently cite time pressure as a contributing factor. Not because pilots lack skill, but because compressed timelines increase cognitive load beyond safe limits. Similarly, in emergency medicine, errors are more likely during periods of high patient volume and time constraint, even among experienced professionals. The pattern is consistent. When time shrinks, mistakes grow. The survival implications of this are broader than they appear. A disrupted morning does not just affect productivity, it alters your entire risk profile for the day. You are more likely to forget essential items, misjudge distances and speeds while driving, and overlook environmental hazards. Your situational awareness narrows, a phenomenon known as attentional tunneling, where focus locks onto immediate tasks at the expense of peripheral information. This is the same mechanism that causes drivers to miss stop signs or pedestrians when they are mentally overloaded. As the day progresses, the initial delay begins to interact with external systems. Transportation schedules, workplace expectations, and social commitments are all time-dependent networks. When you fall out of sync with these systems, friction increases. You encounter longer wait times, reduced flexibility, and fewer recovery options. Each missed opportunity to realign compounds the problem, creating a feedback loop of delay and pressure. What began as a minor disruption is now a systemic misalignment between you and your environment. This escalation is not random. It follows predictable patterns rooted in systems theory. Complex systems, whether they are biological, mechanical, or social, are highly sensitive to initial conditions. Small deviations at the start can produce disproportionately large effects over time, a principle often referred to as nonlinear amplification. In practical terms, this means that the first hour of your day carries a weight that is not immediately visible. It sets the trajectory for everything that follows. And yet, most people continue to treat these disruptions as isolated events, failing to recognize the underlying mechanics. They push harder, move faster, and rely on willpower to compensate for systemic imbalance. But willpower is not an unlimited resource. It is constrained by physiological and neurological limits, and when those limits are exceeded, performance does not just decline, it collapses in unpredictable ways. By the time you reach midday, the consequences of that initial delay have begun to manifest in more tangible forms. Energy levels fluctuate erratically, hunger signals become distorted, and hydration is often neglected. These may seem like minor issues, but they directly impact cognitive and physical performance. Dehydration alone, even at mild levels, can reduce concentration and increase fatigue. Combined with poor nutrition and elevated stress hormones, it creates a state of chronic underperformance that most people simply accept as normal. The situation continues to deteriorate as external demands increase. Deadlines approach, communication becomes more urgent, and the margin for error narrows. At this stage, the risk is no longer just inefficiency, it is failure. Missed deadlines, miscommunications, and poor decisions begin to accumulate, each one reinforcing the sense of being out of control. The system is now operating in a degraded state, and recovery becomes increasingly difficult. But this is not the end of the pattern. It is only the midpoint. Because as the day moves forward, the consequences of early disruption begin to intersect with fatigue, resource depletion, and environmental stressors in ways that are far more severe than most people anticipate.